Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Your Returns Process, 3 simple tips to increase speed and accuracy. 2 housekeeping points before we get started. The session is being recorded and you will receive a link over the next few days by email. Secondly, please submit your questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A section, and we will be addressing these towards the end of the webinar. Kevin Ledversis serves as VP Sales at Newcastle Systems and helps customers identify where and how process improvements can be made in warehouse operations using barcode technology. Mr. Ledversis has over 25 years of experience within the automatic identification and data capture industry. Prior to joining Newcastle Systems, he worked in sales for Weber Labeling Solutions, Intermac, and Printronics, where he developed solutions for complex labeling applications in a variety of verticals, such as distribution, manufacturing, healthcare, and retail. He received his Lean Bronze training from the Greater Boston Manufacturing Partnership and his Lean Six Sigma Green Belt from Leancore. And he sits on the regional board for the Association of Manufacturing Excellence. Welcome, Kevin. Please take it away.
Thank you, Edwin, and thanks to all our attendees for joining today. So we're roughly a week away from Thanksgiving, and then of course next Friday, supposedly Black Friday, the big shopping spree starts, and expectations are that shopping will be brisk this year, despite what many people feel is a somewhat hazy economy, but that shouldn't slow spending. And of course, you all know what that means. That means that the returns process is going to start briskly right after Christmas. And so if you think about e-commerce, for those of you who are on this call today in the e-commerce business, it's a huge challenge. I mean, the business is growing so substantially, and it's just it's complicated and it's difficult. About 1 in 3 items bought online end up coming back. And so 53% of companies who are out there look at returns as one of their biggest challenges. And returns are up year over year about 40%. All clothing bought online, half of it is returned. A lot of it's because people buy 3 or 4 items, different sizes. All manufacturers take it all back without question. And so you've got this tremendous amount of clothing coming back. And there's also a lot of product that gets turned away into the landfill. So there's a lot of waste in the process. And at the end of the day, it costs businesses over $7 billion a year. Next slide. And one of the reasons it is expensive and complicated is it's just messy. If you can look at this picture, I have been into distribution centers, 3PLs who do nothing but returns, and it's just amazing how things come back to people. It doesn't leave the building looking this way, but when it comes back to you, it's just a hodgepodge of things. Small, large, packaged, unpackaged, labeled, mislabeled, etc. So it's really hard. And hopefully we can give you a few tips today, just from some of my experience and being part of the Work Council and my Lean Six Sigma training, to help you navigate this onrush of returns that we all expect. Next slide. So if you think about the expense of this and why it shrinks margins so much, most people, especially those of you who got into online sales during COVID, you're kind of forced into it. You don't have playbooks and you don't have a lot of experience, and you're using most times manual methods. Those manual methods are full of waste, and all this equates to a lot more time, a lot more space, and a lot more people. People are a extremely expensive commodity right now, simply because of the labor market's been tight for years and years, not expected to get any better. So you've got to learn how to do more with what you've got, and to try to improve those margins. Next slide. And, something to just think about. This is a simple formula. Any warehouse or factory job, really any job, doesn't matter, fast food, banking, performance from workers is derived from what type of methods you use, and what pace do people work at, and how much of the day are they actually doing valuable work. So if you think about the returns process, if you don't have good methods that are standardized and void of waste, you are struggling. If your people aren't incentivized or engaged, so they're checked out basically, you're not going to get a reasonable pace. And if you have a lot of, waste in the process overall, they're probably not working their full 8 hours a day. It all adds up to a real low performing worker, which you really can't afford right now. Again, especially because you can't get people. Next slide. So for those of you who've been trained in Lean Six Sigma, I often will poll people. I wish we could do that. I guess if we do it next time, we'll do it again. But in the warehouse space, there's just not a lot of training on Lean Six Sigma. It's very prevalent in healthcare and manufacturing, but for some reason, it hasn't trickled down to but maybe the biggest companies out there. So if you look at waste, and you can certainly educate yourself, this is a great way to just help your business immediately, get trained locally. There's a lot of government money out there, statewide money. That's how we got trained here at Newcastle. But learn to understand and identify waste. It'll help you a lot. So you think about returns in general, there's a ton of defects. There's a lot of mislabeled products. There's a lot of overproduction because a lot of times people receive volume, truckloads and truckloads, and it may come on a Monday, might come on a Thursday, and there's no leveling of demand. So it's really difficult. And that's why there's so much space required. You don't know how many dock doors to plan for. There's also a lot of waiting, especially if your people don't have adequate technology. If they have to search through piles of things and they don't know what to do with it because they're waiting for instruction, that's a huge problem. Non-utilized talent is really to me, it's the worst waste of all, because you've got people who could be doing way better things, just rummaging through piles of things. And they could be cycle counters who are maintaining your inventory accuracy. They could be team leads. They could be supervisors because you're understaffed. But it's sad when you have to take people off of productive work and put them onto returns because you're understaffed. Transportation is huge in returns because a lot of times people are moving piles from point A to point B to make more space for more piles. And you have these piles of inventory basically all over the place. Many times it's not identified. So nobody even really knows the cost of that inventory, which is really, really, a CFO would never want to see that on a balance sheet. So, and then there's tons of walking. That's prevalent in any warehouse occupation, picking. That's why robotics is growing so fast. It's about reducing motion, but motion is huge in processes. And last but not least, extra processing. That is the definition of returns. When you receive a product and you put it away, you pick, pack, and ship it, only to have it come back to you 6 weeks later in a form that doesn't look like when it shipped. That is the definition of extra process, which makes returns a very, very wasteful process. Next slide. So I would summarize it simply this. If you haven't been trained in Lean, I learned this from the Toyota production system, a guy named Jason McGeaney. He was trained from them, and he said, simplify it. If you can, reduce your motion, reduce your touches, and reduce your paperwork in your returns process or any process in a warehouse, you are going to be farther away to reducing waste. So just think of these three things: motion, touches, and paperwork. Next slide. So we have an app. If you're not measuring your processes and you don't know what your rates look like, you don't have cycle times, you don't know where waste is, I suggest you download this app. It's free. It works in Android. It works on iPhones. It is completely customizable. You can create your own process for whatever process you're doing in a warehouse, factory, or any occupation, retail floor, doesn't matter. Download the app and start doing studies. And so you can at least understand where your bottlenecks are and why you're having perhaps, slowdowns and why your cycle times are really long. So it's called Motion Meter. And when you get the slides, just click on a link and download this. It's a great starting point. Next slide. And here's some tips. So, I promised 3 tips, but I'll give you some more. First and foremost, and this really applies to the small and mid-sized businesses. If you don't have a returns team, and it's just, there's no ownership, right? If it's like, who does returns? We're not sure. There's going to be a problem, right? So if you can create a team and always make sure you're doing Kaizen or continuous improvement events, you don't have to be perfect on day one, but you got to be striving to get a little bit better each and every week to kind of give those customers the expectations that they require. The other thing is try to create some playbooks. There's a lot of scenarios. It depends on the products. I have been in places that I have seen a pile of gas grills, surfboards, parcels, clothing, and on and on. It's just hundreds of different types of items. And it's hard to make a playbook for that many scenarios, but try to 80-20 out your process. Typically, 20% of your products equal 80% of your sales, thus 80% of your returns. Create playbooks so your teammates understand what to do when that scenario arises. The other thing is create drop zones. You have to really segment what I would call unsellable inventory until you know it's good. You got to keep it separate from your typical day-to-day receipts. So create drop zones and make your workplace visual. It's as you remember from the picture I showed you, it is a hodgepodge of things. And if it's not visual to the worker, they will not know what they're working on. So just some suggestions: red tag. That's something that's just destroyed, and there's no way you could sell that thing. It's probably going to go to a dump. And then you've got great product ready to go, put away. Maybe you're a retailer and you can cross stock it and go to another store. And then the pile that I think is more difficult, it's the research pile, meaning there's no labeling. It's just an item and you have to do a lot of research, but segment those piles so at least people can focus on one section at a time. And then if you're using WMS, good for you, that's fantastic, but it's got to be connected to ERP. If it's not connected, then the people doing the work will not have information they require to make speedy decisions. Is really what it's about. Information allows the worker doing the work to enables them to make a quick call, to decide what to do. And if they're not able to do that, the product is just going to sit there for an excessive amount of time. And again, your customers are not willing to accept that. So simplifying this down to a few things, triage, right? Just like when someone goes to a hospital, they triage. So you're going to have a bunch of things coming in, all sizes and shapes and conditions. Triage is essentially segment them into unlabeled, extra large, sellable, damaged, whatever makes sense to you, but make sure they touch it and they actually put it someplace. So then now it's a known entity of what you're dealing with. And then if you can adapt to a very common lean term called one-piece flow, that's really important. A lot of companies want to do batch. They want to focus on just inspecting everything and then labeling everything and then putting everything away. That actually takes a lot more time as opposed to one-piece flow where you're picking up something, you're doing the inspection through WMS or ERP, and then you're just going to do something. You're going to take action. You might just label it and put it aside. You might just put it aside because there's nothing you can do. You can't find the information, but you're touching it as few times as possible. And then last but not least, it's really important to work at the source of activity. You can't have stations with WMS and printing 50, 60, 80 feet away from where these piles are because you don't know where the piles are going to be day to day. You've got to be able to be flexible and let your workers go to where those piles are. Next slide. So, technology, it's obviously growing. It's critical in the world we're living in today. I don't know what SIC codes are here today. I'm going to assume a lot of warehousing, a lot of industrial, a lot of factories. And its automation obviously is growing like crazy. If you're in the Chicago area, ProMat will occur in April, and you will see a lot of robotics company arising. More than every other year, there's more and more people. It's just because everybody is trying to understand how can they, combat the labor shortage. And robotics are great for certain applications because they reduce travel and touches. So if you can afford automation and robotics, or artificial intelligence, where you have software making more decisions for your workers, or even if you just have simple material handling, taking product away from the worker back to the warehouse. Good for you, but a lot of companies don't have the budgets for that. However, most of you should have wireless, and most of you should be able to afford RF because you've got to get rid of paper. Paper processes are killing companies, especially the small to mid-sized businesses, where still 30% of warehouses are running paper and pen, which is hard to believe, but that's sort of a fact that, I've learned from the Warehouse Education Resource Council, there are more people than we think actually doing things manually. So RF at a minimum, and then if you can get into more of the more elaborate technology, go for it. Next slide. And the reason RF is tried and true, it's been around for years, decades. So when you think about handheld computers and wearables and printers, scanners, tablets, vehicle mount computers, they've been around for many years. They're tried and true. They're accessible. They're easy to train people on. If you look at the growth curve, 2022 versus 2027, by 2027, most companies will have adopted this. Do not wait to get to this point, because if you are manual in any part of your process in a warehouse, for instance, your competition is going to kill you because they are way faster. And one of the most important things about returns is it's an opportunity to lose a customer. If you are slow in your returns process, you will irritate your customer to the point where they simply will go somewhere else. So yes, it's easy to say we take free returns. It's much harder to actually live by that and then be able to live by the standards that you set. If you say it's 3 days, it's got to be 3 days. So if you're slow on the technology side with information, it's going to hurt you. Next slide. So what Newcastle Systems does, we simply take those devices that have been around for a long time and we make them mobile by putting them on different size carts that have power sources. And so laptops and printers and PCs, rugged scanners, tablets, scales, all the things that many of you have been using for years, we simply take them from point A to point B. And when people can do that and eliminate footsteps, it reduces those travel times by as much as 50%. It optimizes labor, which is so critical right now, because remember, if you're trying to influence your productivity formula, the utilization percentage, meaning how much time per day do they actually work on task, it has to be maximized. And if they're walking 4 hours a day, which we have a lot of use cases of, you'll never optimize your labor force. And then last but not least, you just become so much more efficient. So it's about mobility, and it's about taking static devices and putting them on wheels. Next slide. So just a sort of a concept, a conceptual drawing. If you look at the picture on the left, that's a standardized system, sort of what people are doing in a lot of cases. They have static stations, whether they're in an office, they're spaced out every 50 feet. No matter what they do, people doing the returns, they have to walk back and forth. You are actually forcing them to go get information and print labels. So no matter what you do, you're going to have these lines on the ground. That's just called a spaghetti diagram. It just creates tons of footsteps, a lot of time, and a lot of waste. Versus the picture on the right, we take those same exact tools and you put them on wheels. Now people can stay in their little zone. They can take those returns and process them much faster. As much as 50% faster. It just depends on how much motion is in your existing process. So hopefully that picture resonates, and you hope to gravitate towards the picture on the right, because that's really where our best customers get the most bang for the buck on the returns process, is they get mobile. Next slide. And this is just an example of what they look like. This is one flavor, but this cart is about almost 6 feet long. And you can see it's got lots of space if you have to lift up something and put it on there. It could be something heavy, it'll support it. If you need a scale to weigh it, you can do that. It's got an industrial tablet, it's got an LCD, it's got a scanner, it's got a paper printer, it's got a label printer. Everything this worker needs to process a return is there. They will simply take that to any location in that wireless facility, go to the point of activity, reduce footsteps, and get a lot more efficient. Next slide. And here's sort of a life example here. This is a company. This is actually a return. This is not returns. This is actually receipts. Well, it's the same process, same sort of mindset. This company had all of their devices in the office. You can see the green arrow, and their people were walking 20 dock doors, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And because of that, the amount of time they were wasting was hours and hours and hours and hours every day. And what was worse is they started to batch print because they didn't want to keep doing those trips multiple times a day. So they start to cheat and batch print multiple orders. What they started doing is what always happens is they mislabel products. They put oranges on peaches, they put peppers on plums, and it became a mess. It was actually costing them $500,000 a year. So simply by taking printers, upgrading them to Wi-Fi, putting them on wheels with their WMS, they're saving $500,000 a year in mislabeled products. They're turning their docks much faster, which now gives them added capacity, because before the docks were so clogged, they could not take in more material. And their speed, their cycle times, their dock to stock went from like 12 hours a day down to like 4 hours, which is really getting close to being world-class. So next slide. And then here's some of the flavors. We have a lot of different sizes and shapes. It really depends on how many devices you want to power, for how long do you want to power, how much space do you need. Do you need it to be height adjustable? Do you need it for 8 hours? Do you need it for 24/7? We can build something that will suit your needs. Most people are gravitating towards these green batteries. They are lithium iron phosphate, and they are designed to be hot swappable. And they are designed to run 24/7 for roughly 7 years of battery life. So it's a real powerful tool that will allow you to process things in a warehouse or factory for many years for very great ROI. Next slide. And this is kind of how the math looks. If you look at a company that can save 16 minutes an hour, which is about average, if you can save 10 minutes, just 10 minutes an hour, it's almost 40 hours. It's almost a week a year waste. So 16 minutes at $20 an hour and 14 people. If you were to buy new printers and scanners with a cart, your investment's about $94,000, but you're going to save $155,000 a year in time. But really what a lot of people are telling us now, our customers, it's not even about the money anymore. It's about the hours. It's just because they can't get people. So if they can save over 7,000 hours a year to do other things, to maintain accurate inventories, to process returns, whatever, it's a good investment. And you can see everything here paid for itself in about 7 months. Over 5 years, it's under $1,400. So it's real inexpensive tool to get your workers optimized. And it's all of these devices are all available through barcodes. Everything I've talked about today, it's all available through barcodes. And we're here to support them. Next slide. So the returns experience, just kind of summarizing here, it's critical because if you get it right and you do as you say, 97% of people, your customers, will come back to you. If you get it wrong and you sort of underachieve, 84% of them will never come back to you. So it's a very difficult slope. And this applies to anybody dealing with customers these days. Customers are fickle, and we all want to maintain their loyalty. Next slide. This is something out of a book I'm reading now and applying it to our own business. It's called The Effortless Experience. It's all about how do you win loyalty with our customers? Because let's face it, most of us on this call today, we have competition and they'd love to take our customers. So what's interesting from this book, some of the myths that I learned about is, first of all, you don't necessarily need to delight your customers in any way. If you say your returns process is 3 days, people will get a check back, whatever your terms are. You don't need to overachieve and give it to them one day. In fact, that won't really delight them. They expect that, but anything within 3 days, they're fine. And even if they're happy or satisfied, that doesn't mean they're still going to be loyal to you. They may go somewhere else. But what really will create a problem for you is if you underachieve in those customer service interactions where they say, I got your receipt, it's going to take 3 days, and that turns into days and weeks and nothing has happened. You are going to create disloyalty. You are going to lose a customer, and they're going to tell a lot more people about it, unfortunately. And so really, it's not about, overachieving. It's about reducing the customer's effort to keep their loyalty. It's about doing what you say. So if your lead time is a week and you're shipping things in a week, good for you. But you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing, especially in returns, because a lot of times a return can irritate people because even if they order the wrong thing, yes, it was their mistake, but they don't see it that way. If you handle it properly and say, I understand you made a mistake, and you get them taken care of fast, you will own that customer for a long time, right? And it's all about communicating with them, making it visible so they know where things stand, doing it fast, which is why you cannot have waste, and making sure it's accurate. Again, all these things add up to keeping customers happy. Next slide. So I'm going to turn this back over to Edwin, who can take it from here.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for sharing your insights. So now it's time for Kevin to answer your questions. So please answer these in the Q&A area, and we'll address those in just a minute. But now that you've learned a little bit about improving your returns process with mobile carts, you may be asking yourself, so how does barcodes fit into everything? As a partner of Newcastle, Barcodes offers design, deploy, and support services required to get these solutions implemented and maintained. From a design and deployment standpoint, we can develop and integrate a full hardware and software solution to meet your needs and alleviate any pain points you may have. For all deployed hardware, we can offer our True Support services, which can include a mix of help desk, configuration, staging, kitting, and other value-added services. We have a very experienced services staff to deliver troubleshooting and repair services. Lastly, beyond hardware, we're North America's largest supplier of labels, receipt paper, ribbon, print hats, and other consumables. Our goal is to partner with your business to get you up and running, but more importantly, keep you up and running with future-proof technologies like those you saw today. So a couple of questions, Kevin, and you mentioned ROI of like 7 months, which is outstanding. But if you turn it into time, can you talk a little bit of like what % of time can be captured with mobile carts?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, about 15 years, and the data we have, it's usually a minimum of 12 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes per hour. But some people, but unfortunately are in the range of a half an hour. And these are big companies with industrial engineers. And the issue with walking or motion is nobody measures it because it's a common human thing to do. So nobody questions a person walking in a factory. They just assume they're working. They don't realize that they may be walking and just it's wasting time. They're going to get something. And so until people actually measure it, and that's why I encourage you to download the motion meter or just go out there with a watch. Until you study it, you will have no idea how much this is costing you. And that's what our customers have found.
Yeah, can you expand a little bit on the motion meter? I know that you showed it on the screen, but maybe when you download it, what would it do? What does it require?
When you download it, you create fields. So let's say you have 10 steps. Pull up the truck door, pull the pallet, drop the pallet, scan a barcode, right? You create those fields and then you measure each and every field, each task, 1 second, 50 seconds, 10 minutes. What we've learned is that with our process, a lot of times they'll scan something at a computer and have to walk back to where the load is. That may take them 40 seconds just to do the walk, right? And it's not obvious until you start measuring these things. So it's really good because it's all customizable to your own processes. It's customizable to your own exact, so it's your data, and it'll allow you to make decisions about where you want to invest in technology or how you want to adjust people or improve the process.
Great. So in your introduction, I mentioned how you received Lean Bronze training. Can you talk a little bit about, how do you apply that on a daily basis in your current job? And also, if somebody's interested, how can they get trained?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate. I've been barcoding now for 32 years. I've got to date myself here, Edwin. But I was really fortunate because 30 years ago, I had a customer called Wiremold. Wiremold was one of the first companies in America to adopt Lean Six Sigma. They grew from $80 million to $800 million in sales in 10 years. And I got to live that growth, watching the CEO, Art Byrne, literally teaching his people the value of Lean. And they had tremendous profit sharing, incentives, and people working the floor were all looking to reduce waste and made that company incredibly profitable. So I kind of learned through osmosis, but I got formally trained when I came to Newcastle. Our owner invests in that. It's one of our 5 core principles. And Boston has a lot of great consultants. And so I did it because I saw the value for Wiremold, but I also see the value in our company and how it integrates into my own job in sales. We're trying to help customers become, more efficient. And the only way you can really do that is to reduce waste. So all of our salespeople have been trained, our internal people. It's powerful stuff and anybody can learn it. A lot of states have grants and it's very simple. If you invest in your people and your company grows and you're profitable, you'll probably hire more people. And that's what the state benefits for. So if you're in Illinois, just do a little research. If you want to learn more, just reach out to me or the American manufacturing excellence organization, and they'll guide you to some basic training.
Great. Well, with that, we've reached the bottom of the hour. Thanks so much, Kevin, for sharing your insights. Very, very educational. I know the attendees will agree. And to all of you, have a great Thanksgiving break and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Edwin.